Welcome to the Pan Am Podcast, brought to you by the Pan Am Museum in Garden City, New York. This podcast and our museum are dedicated to celebrating the legacy of the world's most iconic airline, Pan American World Airways. My name is Tom Betty, and I'm the host of this program. Thank you for joining us. The Pan Am Museum Foundation is a nonprofit organization. Please visit our website for more information at thepanammuseum.org. Again, our website is thepanammuseum.org. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. If you are using Apple Podcasts, please consider leaving a review. It will help others discover this program. This podcast is sponsored by the generous personal support of Mr. Adam Aaron, the CEO and chairman of AMC Theaters. He is also president of our sister organization, the Pan Am Historical Foundation. If you're not familiar with Pan Am, welcome. We are honored to have you here and for you to learn about what we're all about. If you already know of Pan Am, worked for or flown on the airline, or just love our history, it's good to be with you again. So with that, let's get this episode in the air, so to speak. Welcome aboard your Pan American Jet Clipper. In this episode, we're joined by Tania Anderson, who served as a Pan Am flight attendant from 1986 to 1991, navigating a pivotal era of transition, resilience, and global adventure for the world's most iconic airline. Today, she still flies, carrying forward the spirit of Pan Am on international charter missions, and she is usually flying on a Boeing 747. But Tania's story reaches far beyond her years in uniform. She is an avid, lifelong learner, traveler, and is always making connections and seeking adventure. Tania has been a Hollywood film extra on productions such as the films Catch Me If You Can and War of the Worlds, as well as the television series The West Wing. She is the author of the powerful memoir On Butterfly's Wings, a deeply personal journey through loss, renewal, and the healing power of human connection. In her book, Tania intertwines her Pan Am experiences with the transformative events that shaped her life, offering readers a story that is both uplifting and profoundly human. We'll talk about Tania's time with Pan Am and the soul of the airline's culture, the moments in the sky that changed her, and the experiences, some beautiful, some heartbreaking, that ultimately became the heart of her book, On Butterfly's Wings. Her book reminds us that even in our most difficult moments, there is grace, strength, and as she writes, the chance to rise, just like a butterfly. There is a link in the episode description to purchase Tania's book. She also has an exciting new project in the works for 2026 as the host of an international radio show called The Global Gratitude Show with Tania Anderson that will be beamed to more than 150 countries from Brushwood Media. I'd like to introduce Tania Anderson to the Pan Am podcast. Thank you for joining us, Tania.
Good to see you again, Tom.
So I read your book, and the one question I have is, what have you not done?
Oh, wow. Well, there are a few places I'd like to visit where I haven't been. I'd like to go to Tibet and Bali and New Zealand. But I like to joke and say I've done every kind of flying except rendition flying. So,
well, it's your book is very captivating, and you have a very, very interesting and fascinating life and story. Let's start with the beginning. Where were you born? And tell us a little bit about your parents and your first 10 years or so, and then we can start the conversation from there.
Okay, well, I was actually conceived in Venezuela, which is pretty funny because my parents had been married 9 years, and everybody was thinking that they wouldn't be able to have any kids, and then all of a sudden, bam, here I come. I grew up in McLean, Virginia, CIA territory, right outside of D.C. And then my parents got divorced when I was 6, but it's okay. It's part of what was supposed to happen in my life, so I'm fine with it. Yeah, because they both love me so much, so that's what really counts. And then my father sent me to school in England when I was 14 because he was very ill with emphysema and he knew he was on his way out of this world. So he wanted to get me all settled. And he found the name of the school. It's called Millfield School. And a lot of very, very well-known people have gone there. Royals and also Elizabeth Taylor's two sons, Chris and Michael Wilding, the present king of Thailand, King Rama the
Oh, wow.
so, and my father
Wow.
found out about the school from a countess, lovely lady. Her husband was attached to the Dutch embassy as like the number 3 man in the Navy, and they were a count and countess, the Van Lindens. And she first recommended a girls' school like Benedin, like where Princess Anne went. And even at 13, Tom, I said, "Oh no, Daddy, not a girls' school. So, and that's a good thing.
What did your father do?
Oh, he was an attorney and an architect. So he served before the United States Supreme Court as an attorney, and then he also built Foxhall Village in D.C., which is up near the French embassy, kind of in that area, the wooded area.
Okay. So you were shipped off to England for boarding school, right? So this is like an all-inclusive school that you lived at.
That's right, for 4 years.
So tell us a little bit about that experience.
Well, it wasn't easy at first. It was kind of funny because he arranged because I was a UM, an unaccompanied minor,
Mhm.
so he had arranged for me to go on Air India to London. The reason for that was because he had known Raj Malik, who was an executive, and said, "Well, she'll be well looked up after." It was on a Boeing 707. I remember looking at the engines and thinking, "My life will never be the same again after this." But then after dinner, and they turned the lights down. The navigator came back and sat next to me and tried to kiss me.
Oh, wow.
Jump in, like you had to just jump in the deep end, right?
And you're 14 years old?
I'm 14 by myself, and I said, "Hey, buddy, who's flying the plane?" You know?
And that certainly would not have happened on Pan Am.
No way. But and all the and see, I've always been very fascinated by ethnicity and cultures, and all
Mhm.
the flight attendants were wearing saris of different colors, and I'm thinking, "Oh, this is right up my alley." And and I like the food, the curry and all that sort of thing.
Mhm.
So my first year and a half in England was not that easy. The Brits were kind of tough. What are you bloody Yanks doing in Vietnam? And I was listening to all that sort of stuff. And what am I supposed to do? I'm 14 years old. My father's just passed away at Christmas time, and what am I supposed to do? And then one day, Tom, when I was like 16, I said, "You know what? I'm going to get this jazz down to a science." So I made friends with all the Americans and then the foreigners and then the Brits last. And to this day, I have friends in Jordan. My Irish American boyfriend lives in Crete, and I've been in touch with him. Alexis Tambouras in Athens, Mahmoud Zahed in Jeddah. I'm in touch with all of them. It's amazing, remarkable.
Wow. And you can trace that all back to this school, correct?
Absolutely.
So the school was a turning point in your life that kind of paved the way for your international adventures.
Exactly. And it really dovetails with, see, I wasn't hired by Pan Am until I was 32. So it really dovetailed with that because I had that appetite for, foreign things. I went back and forth every 3 months. So then I started flying on Pan Am on the old 707, always an economy, never first. And so when I got hired by Pan Am, it was just like square peg in a square hole.
What year did you join Pan Am?
85.
So the 80s were a turbulent time for the airline industry. Tell us a little bit about joining Pan Am. So you joined at age 32. So a lot of your coworkers and people in your class when you joined were much younger. Tell us a little bit about that experience and then traveling the world in the 1980s.
Well, it worked out really well because they not only some of them, my two besties, one was 10 years younger and the other one was 10 years older. And I'm still in touch with the one who's 10 years older because they had had this lawsuit for returning mothers. And, in those days, remember, it was the whole thing about how you had to quit. You got a certain age, you got married. So
Hmm.
these ladies had gotten together and filed a lawsuit, and they got it. So Sabine and the others came back, and I'm still in touch with her now, which is really really lovely. But for example, this is a side, but it's kind of funny. When I worked 5 scenes on Catch Me If You Can, my friend said, "Tanya, maybe they'll make you a Pan Am flight attendant." I'm like, "You guys, they told you to hit the road when you were 26. I'm in my 50s now."
Well, we'll come back to Catch Me If You Can.
Gotcha.
And, your adventures are not only international, but you've been an extra in a few movies. But we'll come back to that. Let's talk about your Pan Am experience.
Oh, geez. Well, I mean, I just loved the way the whole thing flowed. As you know, I was hired by Al Topping. When he hired me on the spot, I didn't know that he was very well known, that he had been the station manager as Saigon was falling and organized the very last flight out of Vietnam.
Hmm.
Amazing. I would have been even twice as nervous if I'd known that. And I was just so excited from the minute I said, I was so timid. I was like, "Well, Mr. Topping, how will I know if I've been hired?" And he said, "What would you say if I said we're gonna fly you down to Miami on Sunday?" And it was like I was on the launch pad to my future. You would have thought I'd never been out of my hometown. Tom, I got so excited, and I didn't make any sense for about 2 days. I'm just talking to everybody and so excited about it and thrilled. But it was so amazing because their training was so good, and even though I didn't have any previous airline experience, I could tell right off the bat how different it was. For example, the survival manual had evacuation in 10 languages. They had Dr. Pator there who spoke multiple languages, had written language books, and so you had to study 400 airline related words. So you could speak a language fluently, but if you didn't know mal tormentoso or bulkhead or something like that, you had to study all that, overhead compartments, all that sort of thing. So Dr. Pator would test you. And if you didn't pass, so you had to take the written part, 400 words, and also how to pronounce all the wines in Pan Am Cellar. And if you didn't pass, then you got knocked off the payroll for a month and had to go home and study until you did. So I was stressed out. I'm like, I haven't studied Spanish since high school.
Yeah. Wow. Well, that's cutthroat. And he was a professor, this
Yeah,
gentleman?
Dr. Joseph Pator, yes. And also, the thing about the dignitaries, there was a section in our manual that told you exactly, if they're from the Vatican, you run to your mantle because, in those days, it was like the thick book, and you go to the back. Okay, how do you address somebody, the prime minister or an ambassador, your excellency, your eminence? How do you address them? And then there was that wonderful man, Sho Akagawa at Kennedy, because I was always based at Kennedy. And he used to come down when I became a purser. He would come down the jetway and I'd say, "Okay, who am I getting?" Because he was going to tell you, "Okay, so and so's coming," and give you like a little bit background if you didn't know who it was, so and so actress or so and so. Like you said, I had him from the Vatican as well sometimes. And Mother ladies, all the Yuns also flew on Pan Am.
Tell us a little bit about your famous guests and dignitaries.
Well, one time I was just going to fly on the A310 from New York down to Mexico City. And I saw that Princess Christina, Juan Carlos's daughter, was in economy. So I thought there had been a terrible mistake. And I'm not at all fluent in Spanish. So I grabbed my flight attendant, who's a fluent speaker, and I said, "There's been a bad mistake. We've got to go back and talk to Princess Christina and tell her that we have a place for her in first class." And we went back and we were so apologetic, everything. And she just laughed. She was so sweet. I was very impressed. And she said, she said, "I'm fine back here. I'm with my friends. It's fine. Thanks for asking." And I thought, all right, that's class. I really like that. Really class.
Yeah. Yeah. Any other guests that come to mind?
Well, I had Louis Malle on one time, the director. And it's kind of a little bit annoying, but anyway, so we had put the linens down for breakfast, and so I'm standing because first again, I'm in A zone on the 7-4. We're going over to Charles de Gaulle, and I hear going, and I'm thinking, oh no, we're about 2 hours out. I'm thinking, we're not going mechanical, are we? And do you know what he's doing? We put the linens down, and he's shaving his face. I almost didn't know what to say because I was like, excuse me, you know what I mean? And Robert De Niro was on one time, but my friend Kevin and I were flying. We were going over to Paris for the Paris Air Show because my stepfather had gotten a couple of VIP tickets for us. So the flight attendant came over and she's fussing over us, but she's not saying anything airline related. So Robert De Niro keeps looking around like, who in the hell are they? Kevin, it's so cute. It was cute. Did just cute stuff. Oh, just amazing.
Tell us about your coworkers. Any Pan Am stories you want to share with our listeners?
I mean, there's always so much because we were always communicating so much because there would be something new that's going on. Like I read about when the Berlin Wall's coming down and they would come back from a trip and they'd tell you all about it, what to expect, what to do. You could walk at some point and then you could walk over into East Berlin. The coup in Moscow, we were waiting to hear more information on that before we flew in. It was really hard to get it. Gorby had been in the Crimea, in his Dhaka, on vacation in August of 91, and they had surrounded him, but we didn't know how much access he had to radios and everything. So, here's where the CIA comes in. They help you out. They give you some kind of advance word. There were so many, you were always waiting to hear whatever the latest was. Oh, and we just had an integral part with history. Every time there was something going on, it was just remarkable. We Pan Am had the Civilian Reserve Air Fleet program. So when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait August 1st, 1990, Pan Am was called upon, almost immediately, because at the time we had 38, about 38 747s. And a craft program at Civilian Reserve Air Fleet is when you will turn all your airplanes over to the military in time of national emergency. And if I recall correctly, in 30 hours, they could go in and take all the seats out and then move the material in. Like you've seen those pictures of the Afghanis coming out of Kabul, just sitting on the floor of a Globemaster or C-17. But in the end, they didn't have to convert hardly any of them because they were just flying them on us, so we were just going like a regular passenger, like you say, to Rome.
Yeah, with troops just as regular passengers, correct?
Exactly. With the clips in the belly, I might add. But also, yes, it was that at first when they started that, there was a lot of hoopla coming up to the war. The press was saying they didn't know how well Saddam Hussein was armed, that the Scud missiles might have poisonous gas on the front of them. So anywhere they hit, they would deploy the gas. We were taught by the COs. They would have a briefing with us in Afghali to show us how to put on a gas mask, because that's not the time. If we had landed, for example, in Dhahran, and they had an alert go off, the siren go off, you can't run to the CEO or somebody and say, hey, how can I put this on? Especially if you had glasses, you had to practice putting it on. And when we would have those briefings, everybody would start looking very serious because it's like, ooh, maybe this isn't, isn't such a great idea. But in the end, I don't think we had any incidences. If we did, I didn't hear about it.
Interesting. Any other Pan Am stories that stand out to you?
Oh, gosh. Well, I had Maureen O'Hara on board one time. And
Oh, she's Pan Am royalty.
yeah, she was delightful and beautiful. I don't know how old she was at the time. All I was doing was LA, New York. And it was wintertime, because I remember, because the flight was rather short. Anyway, not 5 hours. She came on board and her aura was beautiful. She was beautiful. She was lovely. She was gracious. And she just talked to us. She was the sort of person that she was not just going to talk about herself. And, she did talk a bit about Charlie, how much she loved him and what it was like. I think they lived in St. Martin, anyway, one of the Caribbean islands, and how she loved him. And the word got out to the pilots. And so at the time we had, 2 pilots and the engineer, and they came down one by one to meet her. And she was the sort of person, she was an empath. I could tell you could say, oh, I just broke up with my boyfriend, I'm so upset. I bet she would almost be crying with you, because she had that kind of energy, a very healing, kind energy. So she was just really lovely.
Interesting. Very interesting. Tell us about the end of Pan Am. for you in your story?
Well, it was so difficult because of what an iconic, it's almost an overused word, but what an iconic airline it was for all of us. I mean, a lot of people don't know this, but you know it. Charles Lindbergh chartered the North American routes. They were first across the Atlantic, first across the Pacific, first around the world eastward, first around the world going west. And then they had Air Force One. They didn't call it, I think they called it the chosen instrument at the time. And like at the end of World War II, they were using, Roosevelt was using, it was absolutely amazing. And I don't know if you know this or not, but Jeff Krindler once said it was something like 50,000 reservations for the first flight to the moon. So that kind of gives you in a nutshell the kind of aura that Pan Am had, that they really felt people wanted to reserve because they wanted to be the first on the moon. So we knew that we were running out of money, and it was very, very hard. It was difficult to make the announcements like, thank you for flying Pan Am, when, I'm trying to keep my voice not, steely and not like I'm going to cry in 2 seconds. Yeah, we heard about like you said, January of 91. They announced that we were Chapter 11. So then we were hoping for some kind of refuge, like, for example, maybe hook up with a hotel chain or some kind of investor money. And see, I'm the sort of person, when something happens, I try to do something to mitigate it. So when the date was set for Delta to meet with the Pan Am people to finance Pan Am 2, because I wasn't hired for Delta. And anyway, so what happened was, then I wrote, it was Cornelius Blackshear. I can remember his name to this day. He was a judge in New York, and he was the one who was going to preside over the case to make the decision about Delta, if they were going to finance Pan Am 2. But they pulled out of the deal, probably something that they were discussing on the golf course, but we suffer. I sent it registered to him, and that was it. So, but I was on a White House press charter the day we went bankrupt, and it was December 3rd. It wasn't December 4th. It was December 3rd. I lived in Falls Church, Virginia, so I would just get permission from Pan Am to drive over to Andrews Air Force Base and just park my little Chevette there, and then go get on the Pan Am plane and then fly alongside Air Force One. So we took President Bush Sr. down to the Tropicana plant. I believe it was in Sarasota. And then, it's so cool. You get to go over and you go talk to Colonel Danny Barr, who I'd met before, because that was like about the 5th one that I had done. And you just walk around and you talk to they're all Air Force flight attendants, and they're just wonderful. I mean, the consummate diplomats, and you have to be, because the nature of the people that you get on board, I actually, the first time I was on Air Force One, I went home because you weren't allowed any pictures on board. No. Whether you're a guest or what, no. So what I did is I went home that night and drew in my diary best as I could remember the configuration. But anyway, it's a very, very impressive airplane. It's gorgeous, and Colonel Danny Barr showed me every part of it, including all the electronics upstairs, in the upper deck, in the cockpit. If you have seen the way the electronics look on tail 26,000, which is a Boeing 707, and tail 26 and 27,000, Kennedy was on one the day he was assassinated. You can see the difference. It's just remarkable. So we had a little 727. We were down in Sarasota, and the president gets off and waves at everybody and goes downtown. Then he gets back on Air Force One, and then we flew to Meridian Air Base. And during that time, Sununu, his chief of staff, had given him his resignation letter. So for my press, because I'm on the press can do both. You can go one way on Air Force One and the other one, on the commercial aircraft. I had Charles Bierbauer from CNN. I had Ann Compton. I had, from Agence France-Presse, another one, Voice of America. They were all on board. So now they're really excited. They can't wait to get to Meridian so that they're going to go down and file that as their story. That's December 3rd, 1991 for the night. So they went down, and I walked over towards Air Force One, and somebody who was senior to me said, "Tania, where are you going?" And I said, I'm going over to chat with them. And she said, "Well, you've been on the other one. They're identical inside and out." And I said, "I know." I said, "But you never know when the party's going to be over." And that was about 11 in the morning, and about 1 o'clock or something, I went back to the 727, and our pilot had been listening to the radio, and he came out and he was absolutely ashen. He said, that's it for us. That's it. That's the end. And we flew back to Andrews, and it was wintertime. It was December 3rd, and I'm driving my little Chevette. I'm surprised I didn't run off the road. I'm crying so hard. I can't see. I mean, we knew it was coming, but it was just devastating. I mean, but on the upside, we all stayed in touch with each other and we all supported each other. And that really, really, really helped. That meant a lot. But it's a big dichotomy to be chatting with the chief pilot for the president on Air Force one day, and you're in the unemployment line the next. That's kind of a weird feeling. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I did not realize that Pan Am did a White House press charter the day before it completely ceased operations. That's fascinating. That's new to me.
Yeah, yeah.
So there you go, listeners. I could learn new things all the time on this
Well,
program.
it's a pretty complex business, wouldn't you say?
Yes. But back to your point about the Pan Amers sticking together and keeping in touch. This company goes out of business. Most of everyone lost their pensions. A lot of people lost their job if they didn't go to Delta, but they're still so loyal to each other and they're so loyal to this company that no longer exists. And that's just so fascinating. I can't think of one other company that has that kind of loyalty. Maybe TWA would be a close second, but I can't think of anything else, like Packard Automobile. I don't think those people, or Kodak. But I can't think of another company that has their employees that the company's no longer around and their employees are still so loyal to each other and to the company.
Absolutely. I'm glad you feel that way because that's exactly my impression as well. We're thick as thieves, and all all you have to do is meet somebody anywhere in the world and say, I'm former Pan Am. And, if they say, I am too, it's like finding a long lost cousin. It doesn't matter what they did for a living.
Hmm.
The camaraderie is just remarkable. And it wasn't long after, so Pan Am went bankrupt in December 91. It wasn't long before we started regrouping. So in spring of 92, Mary Lou Ruddy and some others, she was a senior person. Absolutely. I loved her. She was wonderful. She's gone now, unfortunately. She with some other seniors had organized a lobbying group called Wings on Washington. So I joined that, and we would go up on Capitol Hill. We were getting signatures from people in different places for jobs with assets. So it was too late for us. So we know that, Tom. But, it was going to help future flight attendants when their company sells their assets, like what happened to us, that they'll go, they can interview, but, they'll go with them. They won't just be kicked to the curb, like out of a job, like you say, And so we had Senator Bill Nelson was on board, and from Florida, Senator Bob Graham, Reverend Jesse Jackson was on board, Senator Edward Kennedy was on board, and my girlfriend Susie said, Tanya, because we were all putting our uniforms on, and some TWA people came, and also some Eastern Airlines people came, and my girlfriend Susie said, Tanya, you're going to be crying. I said, yes, I know, but it comes with the territory. And we went and, we really tried hard to get the legislation passed, but as you know, it takes a lot of doing. But then World Wings also got very involved because they did things with CARE, the NGO CARE.
Hmm.
And that's amazing too, because so now we were volunteering for international human rights. And that would include Education for All Act, Child Marriage Act, and then, giving subsidies to farmers to teach them, go into the countries and teach them about their flooding, like in Bangladesh, it keeps flooding over and over and over again. And you teach them about it to empower them, And so that was very, very, very rewarding. And it's a wonderful way to network out because you're all on the same mission. So if you meet other people, you bond with them immediately because you've got the same ideals. And then in 93, Ganilla, I was at American by then. I hated it because that was that domestic stuff. Sorry, but anyway. And Ganilla Crawford calls me from Miami and she says, Tanya, I've got some great news. Now we're on a 5-day strike, And of course I'm at home with a pilot, an American Airlines pilot that I rented to. And she said, I've got some really good news. I said, girl, is it men or is it money? And she said, well, it's an opportunity. I said, okay, what is it? She said the first it was a Nigerian Hodge. It was the Nigerian Hodge. That was March of 1993. And I called a Pan Am friend of mine, Cicero Fain, and had got him on board. And we took 747s over to Nigeria. And we worked for somebody called Chief Cabo, a wet lease, when you bring the mechanics, the ground people, and everybody. And boy, that was really something. And Cicero and I trained the Nigerian flight attendants. So we're going to have mixed crews, 4 Americans and 10 Nigerians on each plane. It was really remarkable. But we enjoyed it because it was that Pan Am spirit on again. The mechanics were former Pan Am. A lot of them were from the Philippines. The pilots were all former Pan Am. That was so remarkable. So then, I'm sorry, I got a little bit out of sync. It was fall of 93 when we were on strike with American, and Ganilla calls, same gal that got us set up for the Nigerian Hodge, and said, yes, we have this thing in Tajikistan. They'll fly you over, they'll commercial you over. They want just that one airplane I told you about earlier, the Snow Leopard 747 SP. They want you to train the Tajikis in how to do a Pan Am service. And they'll pay $2,500 for 3 weeks. But now our strike was over. So I did something really naughty. I shouldn't even say this. I went to urgent care, told them my back was killing me, had them write me a note, and I was off. I was off on my adventure. So I went over, and that's how I worked with everybody, Vince Rossi and everybody, worked the Pan Am inaugural, the Tajik inaugural flight from London to Dushanbe, and then they had that whole ceremony I mentioned earlier, and then they give the pilots these special coats and stuff, and they take them inside and they want to shoot vodka, and the pilot's like, no, we got to go on to Karachi, and then we got to go back to London. They said, what difference does that make? It was like really amazing. And then after that, I went to Saudi Arabia. So again, I took a legit leave of absence from American, and went over to Saudi Arabia to do subservice for Saudia in Jeddah. And we had quite a lot of Pan Amers over there. Again, pilots and, all that. They just can't get enough. And then 96 did the Air India Hodge out of Bombay, Calcutta, and New Delhi. That's how I went to, as you know, Mother Teresa's house, and just took my chances, and she happened to be there, and I couldn't believe it. It was just a remarkable serendipity. And then we went, then in 97, we went back to Saudi Arabia for 8 months. I mean, we had a compound. We're making our moonshine, we're making our vino, we're just living in a compound. The only thing you got to put your abaya on when you go out. And everybody, I mean, they all remember it because it's just such an extraordinary time. By then, we had some Eastern people working with us as well, which is really cool. So
yeah, that's fascinating. So the 90s, you have former Pan Am people, former Eastern people, and there was like this community internationally still flying together.
Exactly. And it's good because you just regroup. Just like if you and I were in an office situation and the boss comes in and fires everybody, well, what do we do? If we like each other, we're going to, network and find out what we've got, and make something.
Let's go back to Mother Teresa. Tell us about that story.
Well, excuse me, the newspaper, she was very close to the Pope, and the newspaper in Calcutta every day would say whatever her schedule was. And so for that particular day, we were staying in the Imperial Hotel, which is one of the few very nice hotels. But I mean, it's so rough. The minute you step outside, it's like, wow, yeah, the smell and everything. It's really rough. It's rougher than Bombay and New Delhi. It's really difficult. So I said to Sammy Abrahani, he was our chief pilot. I said, I'm going to go see Mother Teresa. And he said, well, she's in Rome. I said, yeah, Sammy, I know, but I just have this feeling. I just want to go see her, And he said, okay, we're going to have a Mai Tai afternoon and a barbecue and all that. I said, all right. So I go, and then, Tom, how people are when they're around somebody famous, they have this because they don't want to be too loud because that's embarrassing. But if they're too quiet, you can't hear what they're saying. So I went over, I said, they're in the foyer. I said, you guys, what's going on? And they said, Mother Teresa canceled her trip to Rome. She'll be out in about 20 minutes. And I just went, I thought in my mind, jackpot. I couldn't believe it. And I'm not even Catholic. I'm Episcopalian. But anyway, so I went upstairs and I'm just waiting. And Tom, on purpose, okay, so upstairs, it's like square balcony. And we can see her on like one side. She's just standing there at the screen, but we don't know quite yet if she's coming out yet or not. I purposely stood at the back because once she emerged, I wanted to see how everybody reacted. And I'm hearing all the language. I'm hearing Tagalog, I'm hearing German, I'm hearing Italiano, I'm hearing all the language. And I'm watching how each person reacts when she put her hands on their head, you know? So I knew that she had broken her collarbone about the month before or something like that, but I didn't know how much English she spoke. So when she got to me, she was 4'9". And I knew because I had seen her standing in a wonderful picture with Princess Diana, a famous picture. And Diana was like me, like 5'10", and Mother Teresa was 4'9". So I knew she was very petite. So when she walked towards me, I said, I patted my collarbone and I said, how are you doing? And she said, praise be to God, I'm fine. And I could see that she wasn't feeling well. I found out later she had congestive heart failure, pretty bad arthritis, and also in the collarbone, and then malaria. So she was dealing with,
Oh my.
yeah, right. So then she motions for me to put my head down, and she put both her hands on my head. And when she did that, it was like I could feel a waterfall from heaven coming straight through her and straight down through my body. And in that instant, I knew that I would have that feeling anytime I wanted to bring it about again for the rest of my life. When I'm on my deathbed, I'll probably just be thinking about all the highlights of my life. Obviously, that's one. But she was absolutely remarkable. Everybody had a different reaction to the way some people kind of gasped, some people just fell into prayer. And that's when Sister Anne Therese said to me, you sound American. And she said, I was in D.C. for 5 years. And then I realized that we'd had a phone conversation. And then that was fabulous. And so she said, well, let me get a picture of you with Mother. She won't mind. And Mother Teresa gave me a fistful of medals that have been blessed from her sari. And I came back to the States and I gave them away to friends of mine that were ill to help them heal and everything. But her presence was amazing. When I saw her, I started thinking about, like, what if I'd seen Gandhi in person? Also very, very small in stature, very thin, wiry, and you wonder, this, you never know who's doing God's work. That's But how Pan Am plays in this too is also, you may know, I went to her leper shelter outside of Calcutta, and the lepers there make the saris. I don't know if you know that or not, the blue and white saris.
No.
And I like that.
Interesting.
It gives them satisfaction, like I'm doing something. And they're just blue and white, and then they grow their own vegetables. So essentially, they're eating organically. And then I also went to her Sister Anne Therese also took me to 2 of their orphanages, which is really something. It was really some experience.
So tell us more about your time in the 1990s, and then we can talk about your time in Hollywood.
Well, actually, in the early 1990s, a Pan Am passenger that I had met who was working at 20th Century Fox, but as a male secretary, he invited me twice to the Emmys. That's when Fox was hosting it, because they took turns. You probably know that the different networks take turns. And so that was a lot of fun. I went up to speak with Steven Spielberg and all that sort of thing. But after we did the second year in Saudi Arabia, which was 97, we came back in 98 and we flew for Coletta. We flew the United States Air Force between Yokota Air Base, Japan, and Elmendorf in Alaska, and we went back and forth. And then it was after that we were trying to regroup and go to the Hajj and do it for Indonesia, which I would have loved. Everybody was waiting for that, but it fell through. And then that's when I said, I'm going to go to Hollywood. So I came out and I stayed with Dan, my friend from Fox, and I got my vouchers pretty quickly. Actually, I was very lucky because it's kind of like flying. You play by the rules of the game. Somebody's always watching you. You don't know who the producer is and who you know what I'm saying, and they're watching you. When you play by the rules of the game and you're user friendly and you show up in your own nice wardrobe and let them pick from, they like you and they get to know you, and then that's when things take off. So I was able to join SAG pretty early. And that it's been a fun experience. I really miss it, actually, but I can't do it with my present schedule.
So what movies have you been in?
War of the Worlds. I was a regular on West Wing. They would make me like Secret Service. They made me a Air Force captain one time. They made me a full bird colonel, Army colonel. Sat me right next to
Really?
Martin Sheen, and I was thinking in the Situation Room, and I was thinking to myself, oh no, oh no, I'm too low ranking. You have to be like at least a 1-star chic, And they said, Tanya, can you step out? And then that was cool, but it was a fabulous set to work on because it was so well done.
That's so fun.
And Aaron Sorkin is just out of this world. I mean, he's so down to earth. He's so brilliant. And then I did a little bit of stand-in work, yeah. So I did War of the Worlds. I did a World Trade Center with, and Oliver Stone picture picked the background, and he picture picked. He looked at so many photos because he had about 400 of us there, and they did it in a part of Playa del Rey, and they were setting up the scene. For example, when the buildings have been hit. And all the paper and all the stuff is coming from, all the debris is coming down. But Oliver Stone is really a stickler for authenticity. So he flew in about 20 of the FDNY and the NYPD. All right, just flew in with all their equipment and everything. And then there's a lady, you may remember this if you saw the pictures stuff. There was a thin, tall Black lady just covered in ash, and she'd been selling flowers close to the World Trade Center.
Yeah.
And she was looking for a friend. I can't remember her friend's name, but it was haunting. And Oliver Stone said, bring her here. I want her to be in the film. And then he had her walking along, calling the name with all the debris coming down. And we did about, I don't know, 10 or 12 takes on that. And the guys were in cherry pickers throwing things down.
Mm-hmm.
But every time they would do the sirens, say, okay, pictures up, and we do the sirens, I would get turkey skin all over again. And of course, they made us filthy because, it's unrealistic to have a tie and all that. Work that part, and then work the scene where we're sitting in the lobby and we're all in shock. We're sitting on gurneys and stuff, and we're wounded, and everybody's running down into the lobby and screaming. And Oliver Stone is shooting it through the glass doors. But he has a real eye for detail because he's like, I'm yards away from it. And he comes in and he goes for the guy that's sitting next to me, the background guy. And he redoes he does his tie. He said, "You've lost your tie in the evacuation." You know what I mean? Pretty amazing stuff. And then War of the Worlds that's my favorite Marine story because I mean I love the military. They're so remarkable, best passengers in the world. My favorite probably military story so far is that when I worked on a War of the Worlds. So it was up in Canyon Country here north of LA. And there were going to be a lot of pyrotechnics. And for months, they've been telling everybody, okay, don't call the sheriff on these dates because we're making a movie, right? So for 5 days in a row, you get to the set at like 1500 and you're going to be wrapped at 0600. Okay. I get there and there's a special tent for Tom Cruise. And then you've got, and the other, the gal that plays his daughter and the guy that plays his son and all the actors, all the A-listers, right? And everybody, so when you're a background, you stand in line to get your voucher, and then they dress you up in their clothes and all that sort of stuff. And your voucher tells how many hours you work. I get there and I look and they're like 15 guys standing there. And I'm like, you guys are for real, aren't you? Because they're standing ramrod straight up. And they are from 29 Palms. So what Spielberg did was he got 5 Abrams M1 tanks, if I can say that fast enough. And for 5 nights in a row, he had those 5 tanks going up the hill, but it's dark too, because they're CGIing in all the pyrotechnics. Because I know you like that stuff. Yeah, and they told us, because, sometimes it's like kind of like flight attendants, but also with background, you got to run them by it several times because they're not listening. They're chatting about something else. So the first assistant director comes out and, he's yelling through the megaphone, says, now you guys, I want you to listen up because we don't want to see anybody running within 50 feet of these tanks because you'll get a suntan you'll never get over and you'll get wrapped. Plus, but you had to kind of watch about where you were going because that's the fastest tank in the world. I think it goes about 55 miles an hour and it digs like these trenches. So I twisted my ankle, but I didn't say a word about it. I'm like, no, they're going to, send me home. But what was really cool about it was these guys had all come back from, Iraq and Afghanistan, one or the other or both, like 6 months prior. So Spielberg did something that I think is pretty unusual. He gave them free rein. He said, "You guys just yell into the radio like you're yelling for your CEO. We're under attack. We're under attack." And he let them have free rein, and they went to town with that because they were doing that for real only 6 months ago. And I bet you for the rest of their lives they'll be talking about that because that was such a great opportunity.
That's awesome. So Catch Me If You Can, 2002, it really reintroduced Pan Am to a whole new generation. Tell us about your time on that picture.
It was a blast. So to start at the beginning, we got picture picked as well, and Spielberg just loved doing that film. So what happened was a couple weeks before filming, you would go down to somewhere in Culver City, a big warehouse, and there's this remarkable lady called Mary Zorfres who had done the costuming on The Man Who Wasn't There and Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? And I worked on both those films as well. And those were set in the 30s and 40s. And so Spielberg had said to somebody, "Who did the costuming on the Coen Brothers films?" And they said, "Mary Zorfres." So he brought her on board for Catch Me If You Can. And let me tell you, sister is so smart. I would love to interview her for my podcast whenever it gets going because she's amazing. She looked at me, and it was a few years later, and she said exactly what she addressed me in from head to toe, the hat, everything for the Coen Brothers film, right? So what she did was Tom, everything belonged to them except our underpants. We kept our underpants. It didn't matter if you were whippet thin. And I started teasing her about, being fashion police, like we used to say at Pan Am. And I told her, I said, Mary, if a supervisor didn't like you, they'd come over, even if you were super thin, and and snap your girdle and write you up if you didn't have a girdle on. And she just loved it because this is her whole gig, how you, And so she had to she picked out the bullet bra and the whole thing. And then she pinches me between like my shoulder. Like, well, she said, "Tanya, is that pooch? It's like between your boob and your armpit." And is that a pooch or is that boob? And I said, "I think that's pooch." And we were off to the races, because she's just absolutely marvelous. She'll be in an 18-wheeler and you'll stand up outside and she'll look at you, and a man or woman, doesn't matter. And she'll say, "Okay, try this on." She'll hand her the whole thing, and it fits you like a glove. You can't even imagine. Oh yeah, I worked on Aaron Brockovich too. Anyway, so we go to set, and the beautiful thing about the set is they went to great lengths to make sure that we stayed in character like 1965. Okay, that's our mentality. So anytime they say, "Okay, you guys have a few minutes break, like to do a little something, but don't get too far away," you'd hear the gals that go in the bathroom. They go, because they're tearing those girdles off, and then wardrobe would come around to make sure you still had it on. But we had the garter belts and those shoes that kill your feet, the real pointy ones, and even the earrings were hurting my ears. It was just unreal. But they would keep you in character because they would play "Fly Me to the Moon" and all this stuff. And it was filmed at Ontario Airport, standing in for Miami. And it was just so much fun. Like, I sent you that picture of me and the guy. He's never even been in the airline business. They say, "Okay, you're gonna be a pilot." And then I was there in the scene. I was standing behind. They have sometimes on outside, they have these tracks. So Spielberg and the gang, it's called Video Village, and they're moving along these tracks like from left to right. And it's that scene where this kid pulls up, and your buddy Frank, who you've interviewed, had made a joke, and he has this chauffeur that says Frank Abigail, and Tom Hanks is all excited because he thinks, "I finally got him." And Spielberg only did about 7 takes on that, and then he just burst out laughing. He just loved it. He thought it was just so cute. And I'm standing behind and just watching, just very quietly, of course, just watching this whole thing. And then there's the scene where Tom Hanks comes running in, a lead FBI guy with all the guys behind him. And I'm standing there, and you can kind of see me looking, and they've teased my hair up. Oh my gosh. I couldn't get the rat's nest out for a couple of days. It was just crazy stuff. But it's just so genuine. I mean, they're looking for authenticity. That's the beauty of particularly period pieces, And then, but the scene where you can really see me We spent one day in that prison. That's the scene, as you know, where Tom Hanks comes in and the FBI has decided they'd really like to hire Leo because Leonardo DiCaprio, because he really knows what's going on. And that's when he offers him a job. And then you can see me right behind Leo's shoulder in the other room, wearing a ugly brown dress because I'm down and out. I'm here to visit my convict husband. And they slapped one of that girl's, that flip hairdo thing on me. But it was just so much fun. But that day, that prison is creepy. There, you have an open bathroom, and if I go number 2, well, too bad. You can see everything. They had marked how many days I've been here, blah blah blah. There were dead birds everywhere. There, what was the other thing? It was just awful. But Spielberg made up for it because that day, each person working on the set, even us, they call us props with appetites when they think we're not listening. We had T-bone steaks and lobster tail for lunch. And I think that was
Wow.
Spielberg's way of saying, thanks for being flexible in this creepy prison, because it was creepy.
Wow. I don't know how I could be an extra in Hollywood because I would I would be 300 pounds.
Oh, no. Well, they're known for, usually you have pretty damn good food on the set, you know.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. That's a big deal. But you want people to be satisfied and ready to work and like into character, even though we're just background, just into character.
Sure. And to our listeners, Tania's book is called On Butterflies' Wings, an anthology of international escapades. And there is a link in the episode description to purchase this book. Tania, so you have met some very interesting people. You've done some very interesting things. Hollywood extra, Pan Am international flight attendant. But you've also met some very interesting people. Nelson Mandela, the Dalai Lama, Bill Clinton, Barack Obama. You saw the space shuttle Atlantis launching. What what story would you like to share with our listeners that was really inspirational for you, especially in these crazy times we live in? We need a good inspirational story from Tania Anderson.
Well, it's tough. It's tough because it's like saying which friend do you love the most, and you love something different about each one. But I'll say this. When I met Nelson Mandela was remarkable. And it just happened by chance. I happened to know Congressman Jerry Kletzka from Wisconsin, who's also gone now. He was in the Ways and Means Committee. So I was watching TV and they said Nelson Mandela is in New York and he's coming to DC and on Tuesday, I think, he's going to get the Congressional Gold Medal. He's going to be awarded the Congressional Gold Medal from President Bill Clinton. And he's the first African to ever get it. And it is solid gold. So I thought, oh my God, Nelson Mandela. Of course, I was in DC, So I called Jerry and I said, Jerry, the congressman, I said, I hope this isn't too much to ask, but is there any chance you could get me just one invite to see Nelson Mandela? And he said, Tania, you're in luck because Bonnie and I are going to be out of town. You have 2 invites.
Oh, wow.
I was so excited. So I called all the Africans I knew, the Nigerians, and I know several, quite a few. I called Jerry, and nobody could make it because it was such short notice. So anyway, I went into the office, his office, and got 2 of the tickets, and then one of the staff said, "Are you going to use both of those tickets?" I'm like, "No, you can have one back," and they're all excited. So I wore emerald green silk suit, and the reason emerald green is it's the color of healing. It's not only the color of money, it's also the color of healing. And I think I know Nelson Mandela was a great healer. He really did so much to bring South Africa together, and then ran for president, as you know. So I got there early, and I went and sat towards the back, and I looked at the program, and it said absolutely no flash photography. And I was thinking, oh my God, my life is ruined, because that to me is your proof that you're not exaggerating. This is what was going on. But then, so anyway, they came in. And Danny Glover came in, who I was going to meet, years later. Bono came in. I flew U2 for their entire North American tour. He came in, but I was going to meet him later. All these people, they all came in. I'm looking because I know different Congress people and stuff like that because they've been going on the Hill for a long time. And everybody was there. And Nelson Mandela was a newlywed. and they had only been married about 4 months, and he was absolutely radiant. So I sat down, I'm waiting for him to come in, and I had an out of body experience because it's in the Capitol Rotunda. That's where JFK lay in state when he was assassinated. So it's circular, and you can really feel the power in there. And I actually went up out of my body and looked back down, and I'm like, wow, I'm really here, and this is really remarkable. Because my father, who passed when I was 14, always wanted me to be involved in politics and current events and that sort of thing. So he spoke about it. It was very cute. They congratulated him, of course. What Senator Strong Thurmond, who at the time was about 98 years old, and he had said awful things about Mandela only about 7 years before that. And then he stood up. He'd fallen asleep, but you can't blame him because he's older. He stood up and he shook his hand, and it was very genuine. It didn't look like staged at all. Newt Gingrich was there. I mean, all these people. It was just amazing. So Nelson Mandela gave his speech, but he was so grateful. I can't see auras, but boy, I can feel him. He was absolutely radiant. And it was so exciting. He held up the medal, then he handed it over to Maxine Waters, who's still a Congress lady from LA to this day, and for safekeeping. And then it was over. And then I saw the stiff suits. That's what I call the Secret Service. Your buddies, the stiff suits started taking pictures because I saw flashes going on. I thought, if they can do it, I can do it too. So I sucked in my stomach, and I did the crab dance all the way up to the dais. And I got right underneath there, and I said, Madiba, God bless you, Madiba. I'm so happy for you. Congratulations. And he leaned down and he shook my hand. It was surreal, absolutely like the Mother Teresa experience, surreal. And then somebody behind me was. Xhosa, his native language, it has a lot of clicking sounds and somebody was clicking behind me. And of course, that took his attention away because now there's somebody from his very own tribe, and so he's looking beyond them. But it was fine because I was able to say what I wanted. And then I took that picture that's on the cover of my book. So it was a remarkable day.
That's great. Anything you'd like to add as we are coming to the end of our conversation?
Well, I'd like to talk just a little bit, if you don't mind, about how things come full circle.
Sure.
So, for example, Al Topping hired me at Pan Am, and I've been in touch with him all these years, which I love. I think that's tremendous. And so when I went to the Emmys, we went to the Governor's Ball after the Emmys. I don't know how it is now, but this was in Pasadena in the early 90s. And James Earl Jones is down there. He's about 2 tables over having dinner. And I thought, oh, wow, I don't like to interrupt people, but I would. And he had 2 Emmys on his table, and he's just eating dessert. So I said to my friend Dan, I said, I'm gonna go to the ladies' room, and if I come out and he's gone, then he's gone. But I don't want to interrupt his dessert because I just wanted to say to him, you portrayed Al Topping in Last Flight Out, and he hired me at Pan Am. I was dying to say it, but I came out and he was gone. So you win some and you lose some, but the 82nd Airborne, I would just like to say something about them, which is so cool. I brought them back from the first school for April 1st, 1991. It was a day I'll never forget because they were just exuberant. They were so excited. In 2021, I was in Mainz, and we're waiting for our plane to come from the Middle East, but we don't know who's going to be on it or anything like that. We were delayed 11 days. Okay, I get on the airplane 747, and we're going to take them back to the States. I get on the airplane, and we have the weapons guards. So the guys are off inside the terminal doing things. We have the weapons guards on board, and I see the AA, the All American patch, and I was like, gentlemen, are you 82nd Airborne? And they said, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I said, I brought you guys back from the first Gulf War. I said, I can tell you the date, even April 1st, 1991. And I said, and now I'm taking you home again. And you've been in Kabul, you've been in Qatar, and now we're in Germany. And I'm going to take you home again, and so so we took off, and this wonderful young man came along, and he's underneath his cami t-shirt, and he's playing with a crucifix. But I see what it is. And he said, Tania, why did I have to, my first trip out of the United States, be to Kabul? And he told me some of what had happened. They were taking turns with the Marines that got killed. They were going to be next up for the next shift. And he said, why did it have to be Kabul? And why couldn't it be Rome? And I said, honey, I will pray that one day you get to Rome because you deserve that. So that's my full circle story.
That's great. Again, to our listeners, Tanya's book is called On Butterfly's Wings, and you can purchase it through a link in the episode description. One of the things I want to say, I've read your book and it's fascinating. There's not a lot you have not done.
Thank you.
But the biggest takeaway for me from you, Tanya, is the worst that could happen is someone will say no.
Thank you. Thank you. Good, good, good. Because I want it to be inspiring like that.
Yeah, like, why not try? So if you have, a favorite celebrity or someone that you're interested in or whatever, the worst that could happen is they'll say no, right? I mean, you've
Exactly.
talked to all of these people, you've met a whole bunch of different people, traveled all over the world. You could have come to Mother Teresa's residence and they could have said no, but you tried. So try, and the worst they could say is no, and there you have it. So that's that's my takeaway from your book.
Thank you. You know what the Brits say? Fortune favors the brave.
There you go. Well, thank you again for coming on the Pan Am
Thank
podcast,
you.
and it has been a great pleasure.
Oh, thanks a million, Tom. I really, really appreciate it. Take care. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Pan Am was a pioneer in air travel and still stands as one of the most iconic and innovative airlines in aviation history. That legacy lives on at the Pan Am Museum in Garden City, New York, where you can explore the rich history of the aircrafts and individuals at the heart of the company known as the world's most experienced airline. For more information about the Pan Am Museum, check out our website at www.thepanammuseum.org. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. As was once a tagline in one of our commercials, we would greatly appreciate your support to help the Pan Am Museum continue making the going great. You can also support the museum by shopping on our online store for all things Pan Am: accessories, apparel, jewelry, books, models, and posters. We want to hear from you. If you have a question for us or want to share your story, our email address is podcast@thepanammuseum.org. As flight crews once said to passengers departing for their destinations around the world, thank you for flying, Pan Am.